Hello everyone and welcome to the next video in this series on the Deep Blue Garry Kasparov matches. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler. We're looking in this video at game 2 of the 1996 match. That's Garry Kasparov white against Deep Blue as black. And Garry had quite something to make good in this game, as he'd lost the first game quite convincingly. Deep Blue had played absolutely fantastically, and now it was Garry's turn. So Garry started with the move knight f3. In 1997 he really went out and out for anti-computer chess, but in 1996 not really. But what he was doing was tweaking his move orders to try and get Deep Blue out of book. Actually in this game it really succeeded, although quite in an unexpected way. So knight f3, d5, d4, and now e6, and Shu sort of describes what happened in behind Deep Blue. So in the fourth game, Deep Blue played the semi-Slav. Mr. Beads, of course, will be very interested in that, I'm sure. But that opening had been prepared for this game, but somehow when loading up the book, something went wrong. And the book, the prepared opening book, wasn't taken into consideration. So was Deep Blue on its own? Well, not really, because ever since Deep Thought 2, Murray Campbell, one of Deep Blue's co-creators, he created the extended book. And well, we'll do a separate video on this because it's really interesting. But basically it also tried to capture the human concept of opening theory. So when Deep Blue was out of the opening book, it could still use statistics from games played by grandmasters to help it decide which moves to play. And that basically, gave it a much better chance of emerging from the opening alive, even if it was caught out. So well, this extended book really came into its own in the second match, and we'll have a good look at it there. But this was a very elegant way of giving Deep Blue some pretty deep opening knowledge. And yeah, as I said, Murray Campbell wrote a scientific paper on it, which we'll examine in a separate video. So, but anyway, Deep Blue didn't think that that the Slav was the best line. It actually went for this line, which led back into a mainline Catalan. D takes c4 played at this stage. Shu actually mistakenly played c takes d4 in this position, and Garry got very excited. But yeah. D takes c4 was actually what Deep Blue had wanted. There's a few moments in both matches actually where the operators played the wrong move on the board. But it wasn't touch move for Deep Blue. So knight e5, bishop d7, knight a3, c takes d4, knight takes c4. And actually this line is still topical nowadays. Played in 1996 this game, but I mean there's a chessball course by Krzysztof Sielecki for 1d4 where he recommends this line for white, and yeah, deals with these lines in quite some detail actually. So yeah, just kind of ahead of their time there really. Deep Blue played bishop c5, which is another very common move. Bishop e7 is the line that's recommended by Sielecki in his Keep It Simple repertory for black on Chessable. So and there's quite a sharp line that's black's really got to know here. Bishop f4, knight d5. So with all these discovered attacks, you're hitting the knight on f4. Knight c6, knight takes f4, knight e7, knight g2, rook c1, and now this lovely move, takes, and queen takes f4, queen b4 for white, and the line goes on and on. Yeah, quite a lot of theory, and not at all obvious really. I mean, if you know it as black, you just equalize very easily. If you don't know it as black, then it could cost you quite a lot of time to work out these moves so far and more, basically. And that was Dragon and Stockfish playing that in my matches, so obviously they can work it out. But bishop c5, not bad at all from Deep Blue. Now queen b3 from Garry, quite a reasonable move. castles, and now queen b7 from Garry. Actually, funnily enough, dragons already giving black a slight plus in this position, but it's not really it's not really serious, I don't think. Bishop f4 was is the main line somehow, just keeping the pressure on and preparing to play moves like rook c1 and rook d1 afterwards, and pretty good play for white, especially if black doesn't know it particularly well. A typical line: bishop f4, queen c8, rook fc1, for example, and then knight d5. Always this typical move, knight d5, and then this was one thing that the engines were doing. You've got actually looks a little bit like a Tarrasch, I have to say, for a Tarrasch defense for black here. Isolated d pawn, but a pawn on e2 that's a little bit weak there. Just a slight advantage for white, but nothing terrible at all. So Garry played the move queen takes b7. Knight takes c5, knight takes c5, rook b8, queen f3, and he's getting his pawn back, and he's got quite good chances of getting the two bishops, with knight takes d7 or knight c6. Oops, knight c6 as Garry played later. So, I think that's basically what he was aiming for, some sort of quiet edge with a sort of a long-term structural advantage, not too many dynamics here. And safe king as well. Garry said that a safe king was very, very important to him. That's what he decided after that first game. Having seen what Deep Blue did to him when his king was a little bit exposed with weak pawns around it, and just looking to play that position. So Deep Blue, there's many reasonable lines here, and Deep Blue played it very reasonably. Played the move bishop d6, knight c6. Takes and takes, and this had also been played by Michael Adams as black, and what Mickey did here was quite clever in actual fact. Well, queen e7 is just a normal move, but after rook b1, what Mickey did was play the move h6, and I think this is a very good idea, and Daniel King points it out as well, just stopping the bishop from coming to g5, so and then preparing to play e5, and when you look at the problems that Deep Blue got into in the resulting opposite coloured bishop ending positions, then you sort of say, that's probably a very nice move to play. However, e5, which Deep Blue played, was very, very reasonable. For the moment, you can't play bishop g5 because of rook takes b2. So Garry played rook b1, but now all the engines want to play h6 in this position. That's all they want to do, really. And then afterwards bring the pieces into play, maybe go rook e8 and e4, for example. That was quite an aggressive plan of Dragon and Stockfish. But the key thing is stop that bishop coming to g5, keep that bishop passive. But after rook b1, Deep Blue played rook b6, queen a4, and then queen b8, which, to be honest, has got quite a similar idea. You're trying to keep the bishop passive, defending against the b2 pawn, but you're trying to do it tactically, dynamically, rather than statically. And Garry takes the opportunity to play bishop g5, and the idea is if you go rook b2, then we take on f6, and we can take on a7 eventually. And this is going to be this could get a little bit tricky for black, just because opposite coloured bishops, weak king, weak light squares. So what Deep Blue did here was play the move bishop e7, but the engines don't particularly like that. It's not that it's terrible, but what they really wanted to do, they're anticipating Garry's move, and they just want knight e8 to be played, which is quite nice, really. The idea is you're just sidestepping it, and then you're going to play h6, and then you're going to play knight f6 again later. But the idea is simply they just don't want to allow the exchange of the dark squared bishop for the knight, and that resulting opposite coloured bishop position. Very striking, but anything with a neural net is quite cautious about opposite coloured bishop positions. They see a lot of dynamics in them, and very, very cautious about that. Also, I think also generally a little cautious about king safety as well. Well, Deep Blue played bishop e7, which looked reasonable. Obviously, if you can take back with a piece on f6, there's nothing too worrying about that. But here Garry dangled the b pawn in front of Deep Blue, and Deep Blue was unable to resist there. I mean, the engines are looking at moves like playing rook d8, for example. Just letting the pawn move to b5 and then hitting it with a6 and exchanging off that way, which is quite decent. A little bit more tricky, but yeah, quite decent. But yeah, Deep Blue took on b4 here, and then bishop f6, gf6, and then queen d7 from Garry. And well, you can see straight away that somehow the danger level in Black's position has really got upped here, and you really need, yeah, Black's going to need some good accuracy and some good judgment here to get out of this, because at the moment, yeah, we've got big threats of the queen coming round to f5, the bishop coming to e4, and the black king getting into a lot of trouble. So Deep Blue's first move was good, queen c8, stopping the queen from coming over to the king's side. But after queen a7, there was really just one move here, and that was the move rook a6, basically forcing the exchange of queens with queen b7, and then takes, rook b6, bishop e4. Now, Daniel King felt that this was pretty uncomfortable, and Yasser as well felt that Black could hang on for a draw. Obviously, for the engines, nowadays this is completely trivial, but obviously, I think in a human game, well, just imagine playing Magnus in one of these positions could be slightly unpleasant, really. White's got an a pawn here you've got to keep a track on. Lovely light squared bishop, no real good post for the dark squared bishop. So yeah, this you're always going to have White's always going to have much the better opposite coloured bishop piece there. Yeah, maybe possibilities to get at the h pawn somehow. Maybe with your king, or maybe rook transferring somehow. Yeah, I think you'd be sitting there for quite a while if this was a human game. But for the engines, thought this was well, actually, first of all, absolutely 100% necessary, and also the only way, but also a pretty clear draw as well. But Shu says in Behind Deep Blue that what they'd done, they'd actually programmed some sort of bias into Deep Blue not to exchange off queens, because they felt that Garry was the strongest player in the endgame, and so they thought that Deep Blue should be keeping the queens on. So that's why in this position, according to Shu, Deep Blue did not want to exchange off queens. There's also another quite funny bit of programming that apparently caused some problems that we're going to see. Because Deep Blue played rook b8, queen a4 was played by Garry, and now Deep Blue played bishop c3, and this turned out to be another evaluation bug. Yeah, Garry makes the comment in Deep Thinking, and I have some sympathy for him. He says that every time Deep Blue made a bad move, people said it was a bug, but I just grew tired of trying to work out, what's a bug and what's just crappy evaluation, and I understand the frustration, the human frustration from there. It's but what Shu said was that they'd programmed something in that said that a minor piece protected by its own pawn on an outpost gained in value, and if it couldn't be driven away by any of the opponent's pawns, or even the pieces, then it gained in value as well. And that's definitely true for a knight. But unfortunately, they'd also programmed that in for a bishop, and so Deep Blue was really looking forward to getting its bishop on c3 here, really loving it. And so, was rejecting other lines basically in order to be able to achieve that. Well, that was kind of skewed it away from playing the right move, which was to exchange off queens. But actually, yeah, in this position after bishop c3, the engines are saying 3.08 for White. So it's just a total win now. So just in a couple of moves, with a couple of bad decisions from Deep Blue, possibly sort of faulty human programming, actually, faulty biases, then you just turned a pretty equal position for an engine anyway into a completely lost one. So queen b8, and now Garry, I think probably Garry was slightly shocked, slightly a little bit nervous, emotional about what had happened, realizing certainly, I think, that his position was very, very good now, because he didn't play it particularly efficiently for the next few moves. The engines want to play queen c8 here, queen c6 rather, with the idea that if king g7 would just go queen f3, transfer that queen over to h5, and in we go, and or with bishop e4, and it's just over basically, or very, very strong. Basically, you can get a very similar position to the game, but still with your a pawn. What Garry does somehow, it just ends up being a lot slower, and the bishop and the queen end up getting in the wrong place somehow. So queen c7, queen a6, hitting f6, king g7 and queen d3. It's still plus 2.8, so still very, very good for Garry, but slightly less efficient. And after rook b8 here, Garry, the engines just want queen f3. Again, very natural, move that queen in there and get the queen close to the king. Garry just took the pawn on h7 here, which in principle is very good. You get rid of that pawn on h7. You've got a passed h pawn now, and then the black king is quite weak. But it gave Deep Blue the opportunity to get hold of that a pawn, because after a move like a3, you start going rook d2 and queen c4, and all of a sudden it's getting a little bit confusing. The black queen's getting in there, and also controlling some light squares whilst also attacking the white king. So that's just a little bit annoying. So Garry had to give up the a pawn, and the engines think just 0.71 now, because on top of this, Deep Blue can swap off the rooks, which also means that the black king gets a lot safer. There's not going to be a rook invading on the 7th rank here and attacking f7. The rooks are being exchanged. So actually, also in a couple of moves, the engines really feel that Garry threw away most of his advantage. Just 0.26 now for the engines. But the defensive structure that black has to have is quite unexpected, really. And I might guess it. I might guess it as a human player, playing this in a practical game. But I'm not confident of it, because what the engines actually feel here is the following. So we just get some normal random moves, nothing too exciting here. Queen to c8, and this is where Deep Blue really gets it wrong, because what the engines want, they want to move like king f8. They want the black queen to stay on the h file, or h7, defending f7 and standing in front of this h pawn to prevent it from moving. If the queen can stay in that position, then the engines think that black's just got a draw. When the queen is not in front of the h-pawn, not stopping that h-pawn from moving, not stopping a white queen from making use of the king side as an invasion channel, then they think that white is just winning. And indeed, after king c8, queen d5, the engines think that white's completely winning again, simply because the queen can't get back to the h-file. Quite incredible, actually, not at all obvious. So queen e6 played, and now queen b5. Again, Garry doesn't play it in the most efficient way possible, but he does play it in a completely good way. Deep Blue never gets the opportunity to put its queen back on the king side. So queen c7, queen a3, queen d6, queen a2. Very nice move. So Garry's just going to take that pawn on f7, and that's going to give a pawn, but also plenty of inroads into the king side, so plenty of checks. Still not easy. I still think that Garry did exceptionally well to win this, but definitely objectively winning. So f5 played, bishop takes f7 and e4, and now bishop h5. Quite a nice move here, threatening queen f7 when f5 is hanging, but also bishop back on d1 here, also covering any advances of the pawn. So essentially, if you can just get another black pawn, then with 3 passed pawns on the king side, that would be very, very good here. So for example, if you go something like queen e5, I'll go check, and I'll go bishop g6, and again, you're not going to be able to defend this pawn. Actually, even Deep Blue, Garry rather, would be very happy to give up that bishop for those 3 black pawns and have queen and 4 pawns on the king side against queen and bishop. That would also be winning as well, and you see that happening, quite a lot in the lines. So queen f6 was played, queen a3 check, king d7, queen a7, Garry just creeping up gradually, and bishop b5, so swapping around. Going to give some unpleasant checks, or some checks from behind, and basically it's just, it's just like a wheel. You're wheeling round and round and round, and yeah, just every time black just has more and more difficulties just holding stuff. So bishop d2 played, queen c7 check, and bishop c4. Yeah, just squeezing all the time there, and now the queen is sort of tied down to defending f7 due to mate. Bishop c3, probably deep blue still very happy with its outpost. Bishop e1. And now king f1 and the move f4, and I'm pretty sure that when Garry played this move, he was starting to think, oh, I'm getting very close to a win now, because obviously if you tie down that pawn on f5, that's a real static target that you can aim for, and well, that's just going to be really hard for black to defend. Well, deep blue took on f3, e takes f3. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a human player would have thrown in f4 somewhere. Just try anything. Just to try and break up those white pawns. Well, they didn't have to do that. But after bishop d2 and now f4, here I'm pretty sure that Garry knew that he'd completely won, and that was definitely happening. You can just play the bishop to d3, take this pawn, and then you've got these three glorious passed pawns on the king side, and a black passed d pawn that's completely blocked. So king e8, queen c8 check, queen c5, bishop d3, queen takes f5, not even afraid to offer the exchange of queens, and some checks happened here, and soon enough the deep blue team resigned for deep blue. We just put the bishop on d3 and then bring the king up, and the pawns start to roll. King comes to g4. You just can't you can't stop this. There's just too much power on the light squares, and black's only got power on the dark squares. So there we are, an equally fine game from Garry. Actually, very impressive. Yeah, somehow I guess possibly the real cause for deep blue's downfall was a human bias in terms of not wanting to exchange off the queens, and yeah, maybe I guess a programming mistake that that really overestimated the value of a bishop on an outpost rather than a knight on an outpost. But I think that Garry played it very, very cleverly here. Just didn't try for too much from the opening, didn't remain a pawn down, but took the pawn back, went for a long-term advantage, two bishops against knight and bishop. The big advantage, as Visyanand once said to me, was that the advantage of having the two bishops is that you can always give one back, and that's what Garry did. It gave him flexibility, and he used it to head into a position where I guess that deep blue, together with those little programming mistakes, was having difficulty fathoming how good or bad it really was for black. Still in that moment, I think human players see it very easily that this could be very unpleasant for black. Probably engines of that time, even something seeing as deeply as deep blue, was struggling to really work out how bad it could be. Engines nowadays, of course, see it instantly. But yeah, heading for that sort of position was very clever in principle, and well, Garry didn't finish off in the best way, but yeah, the long-term difficulties were quite severe, and certainly I think once Garry got really on top, and I think he played the the rest of that queen and opposite colour bishop ending very impressively. Played it really, really well. Didn't give deep blue a chance there. So yeah, I mean, what a match, 1-1, and both human player and engine had really shown some of their best stuff and some very impressive stuff there. So it was really very interesting to see what would happen in game 3. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. Stay tuned for this series and join me for the next video and game 3.